What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Gray Matters podcast. I'm your host, Josh Perry.
And I'm the other host, Jackie Lauricella.
And Jackie, why don't you introduce our guest today, since you know him the best?
This episode I'm really excited about. One of my dearest friends, actually dating back to high school, like freshman or sophomore year, maybe. His name is Michael Reyes. He is a very close friend of ours. He is an intuitive reader. He has a podcast called Let's Be Omnist. He studied herbalism. He does all this really cool work. And I think it really leads to health and happiness for a lot of people. And I thought he would be the perfect person to have on. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you. That is probably the best introduction I've ever had.
Really? Okay. Yeah, that makes me happy because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm talking so much.
That's what I was thinking.
No, I feel really good about myself now.
Okay, good. Yeah, that makes me happy. I think where we want to start is...
Well, how about, do you have anything you'd like to add? Or
is there more about you, like in your, what do they call it? Like an elevator pitch? Like, what's your elevator pitch?
Oh, I'm actually really good at that. So,
okay.
My name is Michael Anthony, as you said. I am a spiritual life coach and intuitive reader for thedivinerlife.com. I'm an herbalist. I have an herb shop called The Tea and Apothecary. I'm an oracle deck creator. So I've designed multiple oracle decks. And aside from that, I usually just tell people that my pronouns are he, him, because sometimes that's important.
Yes. It's actually really amazing. People are like putting it in their like email signatures now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I was like, that's so cool. Like, that's such a neat thing. And it's like, I'm seeing it more and more in really diverse communities. So I think that's something really cool. But I digress. Michael and I are both from a little city called Port Orange, Florida. We went to high school together. What was high school like for you? Were you into spiritualism and intuitive reading and things like that back then as well?
That's actually a really good question because the answer is absolutely not. In high school, I was actually a really big part of the praise and worship teams for several churches that I went to. And so back in high school, I was in this really weird space where I was both extremely devoted to Christianity, but also very confused because I was still going through like the coming out process, depending on which part of high school we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So I was really struggling with the battle between sexuality and spirituality.
Yeah.
So that's a really weird place to be in when you're also having like your hormones changing and like all sorts of weird things happening internally. So
high school just being a strange time. Yeah.
Yeah. High school was really weird, especially as you so well explained in your intro episode. Port Orange is a very small town. Like no one knows where we are. And the culture here is very South. It's very Florida. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not very expansive, or I don't want to say open-minded because there's a lot of open-minded people here, but it's just not as modern or progressive. So it's a hard town to grow up in a, struggling through sexuality in high school kind of space.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like I always trying to explain this because right now, as a lot of people know, we are in North Carolina, and experiencing that type of Southern is very different from the like country or Southern, if like people would label themselves as that, than what I'm used to. And I just kind of like explain, I'm like, no, Florida has like straight up like swamp people. Like it's like a completely different culture, and it's not knocking it or anything, but they're just a different culture of people. It's very interesting. And it's, I could see where that would be kind of like difficult to navigate. So that's really cool. But, as a segue, your passion with religion and stuff like that, being in high school, you started, do you think that led to your passion about spirituality now and you starting this podcast? And I'll let you explain what Let's Be Omnist means, because I just like love I love that title and like the meaning behind that.
Okay. Yeah. So I think that it definitely did start my journey in spirituality, especially because I went to a very Pentecostal church. So for people that are familiar with like the Christian side of spirituality, they're the people that lay their hands on each other and people like pass out and they speak in tongues and there's like loud music. So it wasn't, this like quiet, demure spirituality. It was like loud and in your face. And so from that, I learned a lot about some of the more strange practices in spirituality. And that kind of pushed me to be like, okay, what else is out there that, like, if this is normal, what does not normal look like?
Yeah.
So I just learned a lot. I pushed myself to study and understand other religions because I never wanted to be that person that like puts somebody in a box. So as I studied more and more, just kind of other things outside of that box, I realized that I connected on this weird, deeper level where I didn't really want to subscribe to one thing because I saw that underneath everything had the same messages. It was just like, be kind to each other, uplift each other, do your best. Like, so once I realized that, I kind of pulled away from religion in general. And Let's Be Omnist, my podcast, is actually a pun on let's be honest, because, like, people say that all the time. And I was kind of going for spiritual truth.
That's a thing.
Yeah. It is a thing, I promise.
Yeah.
And so I was focused on the aspect of spiritual truths and just kind of commonality. And the word omnist is actually someone who believes in all religions or all truths. So it's just a really focused podcast on what do you believe and what's your story and what's your journey? Because I think that you can really learn from someone's journey, even if you haven't had the same journey.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we were watching, was it last night? We were watching Bill Burr's new stand-up.
Oh, yeah.
He said something that was really interesting, and I've yet to ask someone this question that popped into my mind. And so I figured the two of you would be perfect to ask. But I forget what the joke was, and I just remember what it was about. But what he got to was, whatever. My question is, if there's different religions believing in different gods, does that mean that if someone follows a different religion than the other person, are they acknowledging that those people that believe this religion therefore believe that there's a different God, that there is another God to those people? Or do they believe that the religion's God that they follow created everyone, and therefore that's their belief that everyone should follow that God? Does that make sense?
Oh, so like
multiple religions believe in different gods, but
are you asking if like people that are religious think that other people that believe in other things are wrong?
No, I'm just asking. Shit, it makes more sense if we could watch a stand-up. The way he worded it, I was like, oh, that's really interesting, because I wonder if someone that believes in Buddha versus someone that believes in like Jesus Christ, like if they acknowledge that, oh, there is another God, but that's just what that person believes, or are they like, no, Jesus Christ, God himself created everyone and everything, or no, Buddha did. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's not quite how Buddhism works, and I hate to correct you like that because I know that's not what you mean, but like that's not Buddhism. Example, but
yeah.
Michael, you go first.
So I think if I understand your question directly, you're kind of saying like, so if do Christians recognize that like Hindus, for example, have multiple gods? They have a pantheon essentially. So are you saying, do Christians believe, yes, those gods do exist, but you're worshiping the wrong God? Like, is that your question? Or are they?
Yeah, I guess so. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
So, from what I understand, and this isn't for everybody, so most of what I say is not a blanket statement. But a lot of the times people say like their God is the only God. And if you're worshiping like another God, they either A, don't exist because it's like a false God, or a lot of people believe that if you are worshiping someone or something else, you're actually worshiping something that's not a God and is pretending to be a God. Like, for example, I know I was raised to believe that if you're worshiping something other than like God the Father, the Creator, then you're probably worshiping a demon pretending to be another God. So that's kind of, I think it just depends on the specific religion. That's a kind of hard question to answer for one person.
Yeah, I think it's very contextual. And
so like
no, go for it.
I was just going to say, like, for me, I'm really big on viewing religion like language. So you have different words for the same thing. And just because you call it that doesn't mean it's the same thing, or just because you describe it slightly different doesn't mean it's not the same thing, or describing it as art is also very similar. So if you ask two people to draw what they see, they're not going to draw the same thing. They're not going to paint the same colors. They're going to do their angles slightly different. So it wouldn't even look like they drew the same thing, but it is the same thing. It's just how you experience it is different.
What a beautiful metaphor. I love that. Or analogy, or I don't know. Those two are hard for me to distinguish between. But, you know, I
Great
really...
perspective. I like that.
The religion is like language. I love that. That's so sweet. I had a really nasty experience with religion when I was younger. I went to a private Christian school for elementary school.
Did you?
And it was you're pulling my headphone out. And it was it was Southern Baptist, and it was in Daytona actually, and they were very much in the belief that, like, you know, like false gods are like evil pretending to be a god and things like that. So if like, and that was like the whole thing with like different biblical towns like Sodom and Gomorrah, and like different cities like back in biblical times that had like bad things happen to them. Like, oh, the whole town like had a plague, and it's because they like worshipped this false god, and like it all tied back. And so from my experience, it was like, I would even get in trouble for like mentioning other religions, like, oh, but like this, that wasn't in like the sect of Christianity. It was just very much, it was like, oh yeah, we're non-denominational, but only for like Christian religions, not for anything other than that. So that was kind of like my experience with that as far as people who were very religious. I've met other people that were spiritual and had their own religion, and they're like, yeah, but do whatever you want as long as you're like kind and loving and like doing the right things. As long as your religion isn't telling you to hurt other people, then it's great. And I think that that's an important perception to have.
I always like to clarify for people because some people hear me talk about my path and they think that I now have like this terrible relationship with the Christian church, or that like I'm anti-Christian of some kind. And I think it's just because people are used to that being the response that they get from people in my shoes. But I actually still very much agree with and have this like strong resonance with my Christianity and like my upbringing from Abrahamic faith. That still makes sense to me, and it's still a very big part of what I do. And I always remind people that my problem is not with Christianity. My problem is not with Christ, or my bad experiences weren't with the entire church. It was like one or two people who were a part of a specific church. So I always really like to emphasize not every church believes the same thing. You might even go to a church with 100 people and 2 might wrong you or like believe something that you don't agree with, but that doesn't mean that the other 98 also agree. Yeah. So
just because
it's very
you were loud. Yeah.
Yeah. It's important to remember
everybody.
that. Yeah. Not every single person in a certain religion is going to be the same.
Yeah.
So what would your, not definition, I guess definition, but like your perspective of like comparing spirituality with religion of any kind? Because I find that a lot of people use one or the other, but I see a lot of similarities between them. But I also feel like a lot of people have like a negative view on one or the other, depending on what they resonate with. So I'd be curious to know what your perspective of either or is.
Yeah, I think it all goes back to that same idea that I was talking about earlier of language, that it's really about what you prefer. Like, it's what you resonate with, it's what you feel comfortable with. So the most common difference that I see people describe religion versus spirituality is they say that religion is a very structured, like, these are the rules, these are the laws, you fit like box A or box B, right? It's one or the other. It's black or white. Whereas spirituality, some people say it's more of like a spectrum and free flow, and you make up your own, and it's kind of a do-it-yourself Pinterest version of a belief system. She's Yes,
Those
Pinterest.
analogies.
Got
Just
it.
love it. Got it.
And for me, I think that that's you really can't take something as abstract as spirituality of any kind, spirituality, religion, belief systems. You can't try and define them as one or the other, because no matter what you do, it's not going to perfectly fit in the box of religion or in the box of spirituality. Because even when Jackie mentioned it, she said, "Oh, I went to a Christian school." Actually, hold on, I went to a Southern Baptist Christian school. Like, she had to identify. So even within the rules of religion, there's like, you might be Southern Baptist, but the Southern Baptist church might not, follow the same rules as this Southern Baptist church. So I think that people just try to overcomplicate things and be like, "Oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual," or "Oh, I'm not spiritual, I'm religious," whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was your question? Like, what was my opinion on it?
Just like
your
the
perspective, like how you would
difference.
define one or the other. If someone were to like, "Hey, Michael, what's spirituality and what's religion?" Like, you could pick a religion. How would you compare and contrast the two of them?
The simplest way I would say, and again, this is another metaphor, I'm so sorry, is like the difference between like the rule book and playing by the rules versus like your house rules. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you still have some kind of structure. It's still there, but you kind of just use what's comfortable to you.
Yeah.
So religion being the structure and spirituality being the do-it-yourself.
This is recording, right? So I can like use all of these analogies like later now. That's great. So what did finding your happy place with religion and spirituality, what did that look like? Getting from a place where, you were confused and you were in the Pentecostal church, and then you found yourself doing, oracle decks and readings and exploring different parts of spirituality and like finding your comfort zone with it. And I don't say comfort zone is a negative thing, just like what makes you happy and what fills your heart.
Your question was, how did I get there?
Yeah. What did your journey look like?
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I don't answer the wrong question.
Yeah. That's fine.
So it was actually super strange. I won't tell the whole story because it's complicated, but at some point I was both kicked out of and left the Christian church because I was with multiple actual physical churches. And so once kind of one of them kicked me out, and then the other one, I just became very skeptical, and I almost became like my inner saboteur came out, and I was immediately like, everyone's against me. One church took me out, so I'm just going to quit before the others fire me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I left in a very strange, hurt kind of place. And from there, I was like, I'm going to do my own Bible study at home. So I started leaning into that spirituality side where I was like, screw the rules, I'm going to do it myself, but within the confines of Christianity. So I did that for a few years. And I still kind of, hung out with people that I went to church with, but I would not step foot into a church. And then I was in this really weird place one day where I literally called out to God. I kid you not. I did like a movie classic, put my hands in the air, looked at the sky, and was like, "What do you want from me? Like, what do I do?"
Yeah.
And at that moment, through a series of weird things, I was basically led to move to Tampa.
Yeah.
And to go on my first date with my husband. And I was like, cool. I don't know what this has to do with God, but sure, I'll go on a date with this guy. That's fine. And then while I was there, through another weird series of events, I ended up working at a weight loss clinic. And at the weight loss clinic, the owner for Christmas one year was like, "Hey, I got you a weird gift. I know that you're kind of religious and I don't know if you'll like it, but it's something that I do, so I think you'll like it." And she actually bought me a reading with an angel therapy practitioner. And so I was like, I'm totally open. I'm not stuck on any specific dogma. I'll go. I love angels. Like, I think it'll be cool. Yeah. And I sat down on this woman's couch in the middle, like, it's literally in her living room. Like, you walk in, I sat on her couch. There was like twinkling music playing. There was paintings of angels on like every wall. And this woman said things to me that like I had only thought in my head.
Yeah.
So for her to know things, like, for example, she called out one of my imaginary friends from when I was a kid, like by name, told me what he looked like. And I was like,
oh my goodness.
What? Hold on. How do you know that? And she went on this whole thing about like how he was a spirit guide to me, and he, you know, appeared to me at a time where like I needed guidance, which was totally true. And I just kind of forgot about him after that because I was told he was an imaginary friend. And I was like,
wow,
get out of my brain. Who are you? Do you know my parents? Like, I was so confused. So she told me all these really cool things. And then most of our session was about how she needed to tell me that like I was a healer and like I was destined basically to do the work that I do now. And so I just asked her, okay, how do I do it? And instead of us finishing our hour session as a reading, the second half hour was her teaching me like how to do what I do now. So I dove right in.
That's so cool.
And then within a few months, I opened my business. Like I practiced and practiced on friends and family. And I just, next thing I knew was deep, deep into like the Oracle, Tarot, Angel world.
I did not know that story. I love that story.
Yeah.
That's amazing. This like
there was a lot of
angel lady.
other things. Yeah, there was a lot of other things that happened like along the way with some pastors in my past who had told me similar things. So it was almost like my whole life. There was like little people that would pop up every now and then and be like, hey, you're supposed to do this or you're supposed to do that. And it would always catch me off guard because I'm like, I'm just trying to live my life. Like I barely know what's happening in my own spiritual world, let alone other people's spiritual space. Please stop trying to get me involved. I gotta go.
Right.
I can't handle
just
it.
like trying to nudge you in that direction.
Yeah. So I just sat on her couch and took it all in and was like, all right, guess this is where I'm going from here.
That's so great. Would you mind sharing the story of your first reading that you did for somebody? Because I think that's also a great story.
Yeah. So it was the same. It was the same boss that bought me the reading, and I told her about what happened because she paid for it. So I was like, "Here's what you paid for."
Yeah.
And she wasn't like very open about everything. Like she was still very unsure if it was something that she should share with people because you tell someone that like you go to an angel therapy practitioner, and they look at you like you have 10 heads.
They're like, yeah, sure.
Great. How's that going? So I was at work and I had told her like, she told me this is what I'm supposed to do. And she was a really cool boss in that she pushed us to do our absolute best and everything. Like it wasn't about working for her forever. It was about us becoming our best possible person. So she came in with a deck of cards and was like, you're going to do a reading for me. I was like, I have a patient in room 2. Like right now, you want me to do this right now? So she pulled me into like this side storage closet space and we like cleared some room on the floor and she had me do a reading for her. And I pulled a card and it was actually a picture of King Solomon, who's like this old bearded man. And there's like sacred geometry floating around him. And the card said, go now. And I was like, I don't know what that means. So I'm staring at it and in my head, I hear this. It's almost like a voice, but not really. It's more like a flashing. It's hard to explain. I'm not going to get into it. So I hear in my head, tell her she's pregnant. And I was like, what? Like I'm having this conversation in my head. I'm like, I can't tell her that. And it's like, no, you have to tell her she's pregnant. Like she's pregnant right now. She's due in 9 months. Like tell her she's pregnant. I was like, not doing it. So we kept fighting about it. And I usually shorten the story.
Yeah. Kept fighting about it. Oh, okay.
We're fighting
just
about
wanted to clarify. Yeah.
So I usually shorten this story a little bit, but for fun, I didn't tell her in the moment. I actually said like, I don't really know what this means. Meanwhile, the voice is getting louder and she was like, okay. And she kind of laughed and shrugged like, almost like she wasn't going to push me, but I could tell that she kind of knew that something was up.
Yeah.
So I didn't tell her right away, and I rushed into the office, and I grabbed the office manager, who's like my best friend, and I said, oh my God. So I read cards for our boss, and the cards told me that she was pregnant, and I don't know how to tell her, and I feel like it's weird. And she was like, you have to tell her. And I was like, not doing it. So she's about to leave for the day, and the office manager's like, actually, Michael has something to tell you. And I was like, oh. So I was like, okay, I didn't want to tell you, but this is what happened. And it told me that you were pregnant and it felt weird. So I didn't tell you. And she was like, yeah, I am pregnant. I just found out. And I was like,
oh no.
What do you mean you just found out? And she's like, I just found out today. And so I was wanting to see like if you were going to tell me. And then when you didn't want to tell me, I just assumed that you knew and you didn't want to say anything. And I was like, well, next time, could you speak up? Because I've been having an inner crisis all day. So yeah, it was after that, that's kind of when I realized, okay, that's the strangest possible thing that could happen. Because she wasn't like, trying or talking about it. She had just started dating the man who she now has several kids with. You met her at my wedding, actually.
Okay.
I think you sat at the same table and you guys became like best friends.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah.
I became best friends with a lot of people at your wedding.
But after that, I realized like there's something to this. There's no way that information would just pop in my head like that.
That's so crazy. And just to think about the readings that you and I have had together. And I kind of stepped in to doing a reading with you. Like, I've never disbelieved things like this, but to me it was just like tarot cards and like old gypsy women like read these, and you went into like a dark alleyway like in New Orleans to get it done, and like maybe she'll look at your palm, and that was like my feeling about it. And I was just like, I've never really done this, so like let's do it. And I remember sitting down and, well, first of all, figuring out that you were also in Tampa like the same time that I was, after like not seeing you for years and years. And I was like, all right, whatever, weird. And then we sat down and it was a really similar experience. I was like, can you not like say things like that to me right now? There's so much truth to it, and it's just wild. And I'm like, there's no way he can know this. I'm not like open about these things on social media. He and I have not talked on a daily basis since we graduated. Like, I remember we used to talk all the time, like in English class or whatever class we had together. And then like we just kind of went apart and then came back, and that was cool. But he was saying things about like my relationship with my parents, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know why I'm stressed about that. And he would laugh and be like, oh yeah, well, I do. And this is why. Like, and I was like, oh shit, like this is so weird. So now, if you want to hear some truth that you don't want to quite face yourself, go to thedivinerlife.com and book yourself an appointment with Michael, because it's refreshing. And to me, it's a good little kick in the ass. So I like to do it every couple of months and just have a good little kick in the ass, I guess.
For me, it's also good clarity.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had an experience where I'd say it kicked me in the ass. It just hit me with some truth of things that I was wanting to feel good about and be confident in. And that's what I texted Michael today. Totally forgot we were doing this tonight, by the way. But when I texted him, it's just because I was thinking of something in our last reading that Michael told me. And it's been something I've been meditating on a lot lately and putting my focus into. And it's just crazy how much sense it makes. Yeah. And that's absolutely what I like. I didn't want it. The way you're putting it, it's like, yeah, if you want to get kicked in the ass, and most people are like, oh, I don't really want that. Like, I don't want to face my truth. But it doesn't have to be like that. That's definitely a tool. But for me, it's been more of just, I'm putting so much time and effort into these areas, and I just want clarity. Yeah. And I feel like that's what that is for me. Yeah. And I had a question earlier about this. What did you want to do when you were younger? Like, what were you aspiring to do before this flip?
That's a really loaded question. I didn't really want to do anything, which is why it's such a loaded question, because I can tell you all of the things that I was told I was going to do, or the things that I was expected to do. But so growing up, I didn't really have like tough parents. And I can say that confidently because I listened to Jackie talk about her experience with Taekwondo. And I was like, oof, my parents, like they were not as tough as I thought I was, as they were. But, growing up, like there were these expectations of, for example, I play the piano, and, I started piano lessons when I was 4 or 5. Like I could barely, like my hands barely could push keys hard enough. And I played all the way through high school. I joined, like I said, praise and worship bands for multiple churches. So like it was always kind of expected that I was going to be a musician or I was going to go to school for music. And then I was always really told like, oh, you're a great writer. You should go to school to be a writer. And so I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what I'll do. So when graduation came in high school and people were like, what are you going to go to school for? I was like, music, writing. I had never really stopped to think that, like, what do I actually want to do? Do you know what I mean? So by the time I had realized, okay, I'm an adult, I need to pick a plan, I was already kind of on my spiritual journey, and I just did that. So I never really had a moment to decide, what do you want to do? It was always just kind of, I'll figure it out later. And then instead it figured me out.
Yeah. I think my perception of you in high school was I thought you were going to go to school for music. You were like, in my eyes, you were a musician.
Yeah. A lot of people thought I was a musician or I was an actor but you know, I think it's just because those are the things I did for fun. And so
yeah,
that just.
He actually, we both tried out to be the elected class speaker in high school, and I'm never gonna not bring it up because I'm still upset about it. And, you know, it's fine. I don't hold a grudge, but I'm still just upset a little bit. And Michael got the elected class speaker and I did not.
To clarify, Jackie was so upset when we were both auditioning. I was like, oh, wait, you're going to audition? She said, yeah. And I was like, I'm going to audition. She said, okay, well, if you win, I'm going to roundhouse kick you to the face. And I didn't know at the time.
Is important.
I didn't know that she was in Taekwondo. And now that I've gotten to know her, I'm like, oh my God, she was actually going to kick me. Like she could actually do that.
Really kicked me in the face. But I didn't. I was like totally happy for you. And you gave a great speech. But I was just like, I mean, I did hear from a teacher that I knew that was on the board. They were like, yeah, it was down to like you and Michael and like maybe one other person. And they're like, but it was kind of like you guys. And we went with Michael. And yeah, but it was a great speech. I thought it was really good.
I think about it all the time. I'm like, that's when our friendship started. When someone can tell you, I'm going to kick you in the face. I was like, oh, she's either terrifying or she's super cool. And I'm going to assume she's super cool.
Yeah, there you go. See that? I'm glad that you decided that. That was good.
Yeah.
So how old are you now? And how old were you when that transition set in to where you were like, all right, this is what I want to do. And this is what I'm destined to do.
So 2012 is when I started the Diviner Life.
Okay.
So that was 7 years ago. I am now, I'm about to be 27 in the next 2 weeks. So
Sweet.
It was somewhere between 20 and 21.
Yeah. I'll be 28 this year. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it yet. Yeah.
Yeah. When I turned 25, I remember being like, oh my God, I'm halfway to 30. Like, I'm basically 30. And now I'm like, I'm not even 30 yet. Like, who cares? I've really gotten to a place where I really don't care how old I am because I know, like, when I'm supposed to do things, I'll do them. And if I'm not supposed to do it yet, I'm not supposed to do it yet.
Oh, what a freeing way to think. I love that. And I think that was a huge part of my happiness and not feeling pressured about that anymore was finally going like, I'm not supposed to do anything. I just did air quotes because I forgot that you guys can't see, but I'm not supposed to do anything at any certain age. Like if I wanted to, I could have continued to compete and then went to college later, but I felt like kind of like, oh no, you got to do it now. Like you have to go to school now. And I feel like a lot of people feel that pressure and a lot of people are like, oh, like they'll even hear, oh, you're turning 28. And they're like, well, how do you feel about kids? And like knowing Josh and I are in a serious relationship. And I'm just like, my uterus, my business. I feel like that's.
Yes. Stop asking people why they're not having kids. Or if someone says they don't want to have kids, don't ask them why. Because I said no. The answer is no.
Why? Yeah. Because kids. That's why.
Yeah.
Because puppies.
The reason I asked that question was because myself being 30, about to be 31 in November, and my transitioning from what I did as a child into a career for over a decade, I'm always fascinated by turning points for people when they decide to shift routes and maybe they find their passion, maybe they're passionate about this the whole time and then they find their confidence or whatever it was that led them on this path. And the whole age thing being a part of it, because so many people, like Jackie and you were just talking about, like, oh, like these time stamps, you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. When in reality, it's like, Like, who says so and
Yeah.
why? Like, that's like, you do you, and this is what I want to do. And I wouldn't have ever imagined I'd be doing what I'm doing today, let alone been able to make my childhood dream become true. And had I stayed on the route that I was supposed to, or society said, I probably wouldn't be happy. And so that's why I really wanted to get your perspective on that. And with that transition, was there any types of fear or like limiting beliefs or doubts that was like, oh, maybe I should stay over here, get safe, but I don't know about this? Like, was there anything like that?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I can think of 100 things, so I won't go on the whole list, but I still run into these moments of like fear and doubt about what I do, because I spent my entire childhood up until, not even my childhood, like even into my late teens, believing that what I do now is going to put me in an eternal space of suffering, right? So like spirituality is such an intense part of the human experience, because for most people it explains what happens after your limited time here on earth. Yeah. So my decisions that I was making, to me, felt like this isn't just a life decision, this is an eternal life decision, right? Like, if I'm making the wrong choice at 20 and I can barely comprehend the fact that I just lived 20 years, how am I supposed to make a decision that could potentially affect eternity? Like, that's it was
so heavy,
mind-blowing. So most people are just concerned about making it to, like, 50, 60, whatever retirement age is. But here I am, like, okay, if I do this one thing wrong, am I going to spend 1,000,000 years burning in a lake of fire?
Oh my God.
Like, well, so yes, there's definitely fear involved, but at some point, I just started asking myself, like, does this feel right? Does it make me happy? Do I feel led to do this? And am I watching other people's lives be improved by what I'm doing? Then if that's the case, then I am absolutely sure that I'm not doing the wrong thing. And that if there is a God or a spirit or whatever guiding me, then they're probably not going to make me choose to make people's lives better. If they're the kind of spirit that's going to then turn around and punish me for it. So, every moment of fear that I had was me having to reprogram something that I was taught. So it was really just a matter of deciding, is this my own voice or is this somebody else's voice that I've convinced myself is my voice? Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah. And that's an interesting touch, because Josh and I believe in also perceive, you have an inner voice and you have your intuition, but then there's also like ego and like the voice of your ego. And that's not necessarily you. That's like a deep subconscious, like trying to keep you safe and trying to keep you from like taking these risks and doing these things. And it's like, you can separate yourself from ego and from like survival mode and things like that. So I think that that's really interesting that you're like, is this me or is this like a part of me that I've convinced is me? And I'm like, yes, love that. Because, your ego can hold you back from doing the things you're supposed to do just because it's uncomfortable. And that's crazy.
Do you mind if I give you a weird metaphor tangent because it's fresh in my mind?
Yes.
Okay.
Please, more. Give me more.
As you may or may not know, I'm working on a project called the Small Spirits Oracle.
Yeah, I can't wait.
And it's like cards designed around insects. So my part of the project is interpreting what each insect means. And so I've been writing about the cockroach this week, which totally grosses me out because it means that I have to like sit and stare at pictures of cockroaches and read about them. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this. But their message is about unnecessary fear. And so a point that I bring up in the guidebook is cockroaches are what's called negatively phototactic. And that's the reason that when you turn on the light, they like run away because they're fearful of the light. So all this week, I've had this concept in my mind of how like they are bred that way. Their survival instincts that have been passed down to them for thousands and thousands of years is if you step into the light, you're going to die. Yeah. So that's something that they're not necessarily trained, but is like ingrained in their DNA. And as humans, like the one thing that I've been harping on this week is you have to decide sometimes if you're running away from the light, if you're running away from the one thing that's good for you because because it's actually safer, or if it's because it's just something that's programmed into your nature. So that's like, I'm really glad that like we're kind of talking about it, because it's just been the one message on my heart all week of how do I describe this?
Yeah.
And it's exactly that. It's like ego versus intuition versus self.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Self and like your truth. Yeah.
I love what you just said.
Josh is like, yeah.
I was like, oh, wait, Josh is here. Let's talk about science. Let's talk about being negatively phototactic.
Things that come to mind. Well, what specifically came to mind was the famous speech Jim Carrey gave a couple of years ago to his, it was a graduating class at the college he attended, I believe it was, or it was a college. I'm not sure if he attended. But he said a line that was, don't pick a path of practicality disguised, or no, don't pick a path of fear disguised as practicality.
Yeah.
And there's just so many other things that come to mind about that. But what you said, and I think it'd be important too to let people know what the ego is versus potentially what they think it is, what we're conditioned to think it is. Because it's not like this overconfident, like cocky thing. Like like your ego is your subconscious mind trying to protect you from the unknown. And so that's why I was asking that question, because as you mentioned, we're conditioned by external environments, family, teachers, friends, the media, whatever, anything that's not us. And as I've been learning more about this, I've been learning that 95% of what we do is subconscious. Like we're just on autopilot. And 50% of that 95% subconscious is false. It's past perceived information that was programmed into us, or we grew up watching other people. Or that they were
bred into doing. Yeah, that's just
so it's like that analogy of the grandmother cutting off the ends of the turkey, putting it in the oven, and then the grandchild's the roast. And she's like, why are you doing that? She's like, oh, because, or her mom's doing it. Oh, because my grandmother or your grandmother did it.
Yeah.
Grandma, why do you do that? Oh, because when we were younger or back in the day, the ovens weren't big enough, so we had to cut the ends off. Well, Mom, why do you still cut the ends off? The oven's big enough to fit it in. Yeah. It's like, that's a perfect, not as great as the metaphor that you've been using, but it's another one. So, but yeah, I love that. That was a great way to put it. And that was my question. I'm always really fascinated by like people's transitions, more selfishly, because I just kind of broke through my fear of transitioning at the age of 28, 29 to 30. And you were a big part of that in the last 2 years. I think, that's why I felt compelled to reach out to you today, let you know. But I'm just always fascinated by people's transitions in life, because it's not set in stone. It's like you said, how do you feel? What do you believe? And are you having an impact on others? And like my two biggest core values is growth and contribution, and being able to step in the uncomfortable zone, the unknown, but to help people, which is what I believe you're doing. I think all three of us are, we base our day to day on serving. So I think that's really, really amazing.
Yeah.
I can't wait for the Small Spirits deck to come out, like the second it does. And I'm like, or like maybe like the rough copy, like maybe I can like schedule a reading, like when you have like little like paper mache.
I may or may not have a rough copy, so we can talk about it.
Okay. I'm so excited about it, because I remember the last time Michael and I met up for coffee, he actually I purchased one of the decks he made, and he gifted me a deck that I've always been a little obsessed with. So it was a really special day. And then you were actually telling me that the only pieces of the deck that you had left were the more negative connotations and feelings and cards and stuff like that. So has that been heavy to sort through and translate and things like that? Or are you finding a little bit more positivity in it than you thought you would?
No, I am finding a lot of positivity, and I'm realizing that the reasons that I was afraid of them, because they're not all negative cards. The cards that I avoided or put off to the end are messages that I really needed myself. And so I was subconsciously avoiding talking about these things. So I'm actually still struggling through some of those cards. Yeah. And sometimes I sit, laptop in front of me, hands on the keyboard, for 2 hours in a Starbucks, and I just stare at a blank page, because all of these thoughts come racing through my head, and I'm like,
right,
how do I share this story without putting myself in it or making it long-winded. So
Right.
it's been super healing, which is something to like, I have to remind people, I am not like 100% spiritual all the time. Right. So
Yeah.
people always come to me and say like, oh, well, you know how to do this, or you're a professional. You must be like perfect in your spirituality, or you must have all of your emotions together. And I'm like, I'm a human. I face my demons. Most of the time, I find that when I do a reading for people, it comes across like this amazing, profound advice because it's something that I just went through yesterday. And
Right.
I'm like, let me tell you what I did yesterday to get through exactly what I'm about to talk to you about. So it's a really good reminder that I am not done yet.
Yeah.
I still have more breakthrough moments to deal with.
It's like that. I don't know. You've probably seen it. There's like a meme that went around years ago, and it was like being like spiritual doesn't mean you're always positive. And it's like, now get the F up out my face while I balance these chakras. And I'm like, that's my life. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
That's exactly me. And I've had friends like send it to me and they're like, did you make this? And I'm like, probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. I didn't. Like, who knows?
Yeah. It's that opposite end of, not to keep talking about bugs, but like when you think about a moth, they're positively phototactic, meaning that they're attracted to the light. So it's like,
Yeah.
that's great until you dive face first into a flame and you're like,
Yeah.
gone. So it's like, it's just that constant reminder that you
It's the light
can't
bulb.
you can't be one or the other. Like
Yeah.
there is absolute balance in everything.
Oh, I love that so much. So what do you do in your like daily life, like your daily practices? Like, speaking of which, how do you stay true to yourself and true to your why and things like that? Like, what are your daily practices to focus on your own health and happiness?
So I always start my day with a moment to breathe, literal breathing. Some people think that just means like being quiet, but I sit and I focus on my breath. I find that on days that I wake up and I dive into work are so hectic, especially because when you're working with other people and other people's emotions and getting in their space, that is not a good space to be in if you yourself are not together and collected.
Yes.
So I usually start my morning with some kind of meditation, breath work. Sometimes it's 5 minutes. Sometimes it's 35 minutes. It just depends on what my schedule looks like. And then I also do personal readings for myself. I have a very specific schedule of like a weekly check-in, a daily check-in. I do a month check-in. So like I have these times where I do certain readings and I just kind of plan out what I'm going to work on. And then journaling is a really, really big part of what I do. If you can't tell, I have a lot happening in my brain at any given moment.
Yeah.
And so it helps to just kind of get a large chunk of that out of my head nice and early in the day so that it's like, okay, cool. I paid attention to that. I acknowledged it. I'm going to move on from it because I feel like I did something instead of just letting it play in my head over and over all day.
Right.
Speaking of that, what would you tell a younger version of yourself if you could go back?
Okay. So glad that you brought that up. I don't know if I'm just going to call it out in that pre-podcast when you sent me that questionnaire and it said that question on it. I got tears in my eyes. It took me a while to send your questionnaire back today because I got really emotional at that question because I read it and I pictured staring at a younger self and I just started writing. And the answer that you got is an edited, censored, less dramatic version of what I wrote.
Oh, come on.
But essentially I would tell my younger self, like, you have got to get out of your head. You have to start doing something. You have to stop getting stuck in analysis paralysis. Jackie, Josh.
I love that.
And you have to just try something, anything. Because I spent a lot of time overthinking things or trying to come up with the perfect solution. And then it always turned out that by the time I had an answer or I was finally comfortable with something, the opportunity had passed me. So younger self, do something, anything, try something, figure it out.
Yeah.
Don't wait for the perfect opportunity because it may never come. Yeah. It's like my thing.
I really love that. Yeah, absolutely. I love also that part of your health and happiness routine is taking something that's in your head and not being locked in your head and like translating it to paper or, just getting it out somehow. So you're actually like living that truth, like literally, like you're physically like taking it out of your head and you're making it a real thing, which is really neat. And I think that's very helpful to people that maybe don't feel like they relate to a lot of people, especially when they're younger. Like it's really easy to get stuck in your head. When I'm at my most anxious, like I'm like, nobody understands like how I'm feeling right now. Like nobody gets this. And you start questioning everything about your life, and to just like make something tangible and like put it down or write it down or express it in some way, that's so healing. And I don't think people fully understand it until they find a way to express themselves like that.
Yeah. And for me, it's important too, because there's so much that's happening in my head that a lot of the times, like some of the major projects that I'm working on now happened because I journaled it, because it popped into my head and I was like, oh, that could be really cool. And I wrote it down. And instead of it just being like a passing thought, I had something to go back and be like, oh yeah, that was a really cool idea. And I'm going to do that now. Let's Be Honest was like, I kid you not, in my journal, I was writing about something anxious. And then I wrote the phrase, quick commercial break. How cool would it be if I did a podcast called Let's Be Honest? Okay, back to your anxiety. And then I kept writing. And those sentences verbatim are commercial break, back to your anxiety. And I was like, oh, wait, that was a cool commercial. What was that commercial about? I'm going to start that podcast.
More about that. Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah. It's important. I always say like, oh, I need to do more journaling. And I have no idea why I'm so resistant to it. I just need to do it.
That's all my Instagram is.
Yeah. Just Josh.
Honestly, like I find the most self-therapeutic benefit from sharing on my Instagram and my blog, which is basically a copy and paste, or sometimes I get cut off on Instagram character limits, but I'm
Continued
all about,
in the comments.
Yeah. I'm all about just sharing my thoughts, because I've learned my 9 years of being conscious to my life that sharing has helped other people not feel alone. And when I feel alone and I'm writing about something, whether it's a quick one-liner or very deep writing, as I tend to do more often, being able to resonate with other people, it's like I said, self-therapeutic, but then it's also like nice to know like my sharing is helping someone. And I think that's really amazing to be able to do.
Absolutely. To be able to get your thoughts out and also help another person, that's a win-win.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to bring up one last thing, and I always ask people what their core values are. And sometimes we get to it on the show, but I think it's really important, because honestly, and I hate to make it about myself, but when I figured out what my core values were, that's when my life started to really make sense. And I'm very proud to say that Michael and we match up a little bit, and I think that like speaks volumes to like how we're friends and things like that. But tell us about your core values in your life.
Yeah. So number one thing that I make sure is the center focus of every single thing that I do is love, which I know sounds cheesy and like generic, but if you can honestly say that every decision you make is based out of love, or every action you take or person you interact with or outfit that you put on in the morning, whether it be self-love or love for someone else, if you can honestly say that it's a choice based in love, then there's absolutely nothing that can go wrong there. And I say that with some asterisks attached to it, in that it has to be true. It can't be like some people say like, oh, well, I did it because I love them. But did you do it because you're selfishly loving them? Or did you do it? You know what I mean? It has to be an unconditional, selfless love, which is a really, really hard thing sometimes to filter. But the more you practice it and the more you do it, the easier it is. So first and foremost, everything I do is out of love. And then the other thing, and this is a more recent one, is my husband introduced me to a quote. And it is, I am human, and therefore nothing human is alien to me. And that essentially means, like, if I can do it, they can do it. If they can do it, I can do it. And his example, which is not the best example, but I'm using it anyway, is always like, if you look at someone like Mother Teresa, right? And you say, wow, like, she did all of these amazing things. I wish I could be like her. She changed the world. She's a human. You're a human.
Right.
The things that she did are not some supernatural power. You have every capability within yourself to do it. And then he turns around and he always says, or you could look at someone like Hitler, which I know is always like the worst example possible, but it's the worst example possible, so we're going to use it. And like, when you look at someone who's maybe done something terrible to you or to other people, yes, it is okay to understand that what they did is terrible, but it's also important to recognize that they are a human and you have every capability within yourself to have done those same terrible things. So I always say that Hitler's a bad example because what he did was terrible, obviously. But if you look at someone who, like, cuts you off in traffic, right? Like,
oh, I've done that.
You can't lose your mind and judge that person and say, like, you know, you're the worst human being in the world. I hope you get in a car accident. Like, that's not helpful. And you don't know what's happening in that person's life. So it's just a nice reminder to say, okay, obviously they're going through something, or to have compassion, or to recognize humanity in everybody. The more that I do it, I find that I get angry less and I'm kinder to people.
Yeah. You gotta love and respect people for where they are.
Yeah.
That's hard for me sometimes.
Aside from that, I can't honestly say that I've ever taken out Hawaiian hotel stationery and written down my 7 core values, but
hey, we're doing the podcast.
I can't be on a podcast and not know what we're talking about.
That's true.
I do my homework. But yeah, I honestly don't think that I could list anything other than those 2, because I think everything else that I list after that would just come right on back to one of those.
Right. It would just be a full circle. I think that those are great core values, and I don't think you need like a whole list of them, but you know, I love that. I feel like I've said love a lot this podcast, but I'm okay.
It's a good one. It's a good word.
Yeah.
Use it all the time.
Yeah, use it all the time. I did go back and listen to some of our other podcasts, and I was horrified at how many times I used the word like. I was blown away. I was just like, do I really talk like that? I know I just said it again because I don't know how else to express myself.
I text it a lot, so I feel you. So I write out my whole text and I'm like, I can delete that one and that one and that one. And it still makes sense, so we're good.
Perfect.
Well, we appreciate you sharing. We'll have to have you back on to talk about more specifics of the things we've talked about.
There's so many deep dives we could do in like different aspects of our lives, and I think that would be absolutely great. But that was Michael Anthony, and he's always just been this beautiful human that I've been so drawn to his energy, and it's amazing how we've kind of like woven in and out of each other's lives, and I'm just glad he's a stronger presence in both Josh and my life, and he provides a lot of guidance to us and a lot of friendship and times of need, and he's there in multiple ways, and I'm very grateful for you, and I'm very grateful that you were on here today. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So where can people find you if they wanted to learn more about you, they want to connect with you, they wanted to maybe work with you or follow some aspect of your life?
Schedule that reading. Oh my gosh, do that. And I do want to go back before you answer, and I hate to cut you off, but like I did say it was a kick in the ass, but I think this is just me being presumptuous, but I think Michael just does that to me because he knows that that's what I need. So he just like feels like, yeah, I'm going to have to like shove her off this cliff right now. So I think that's just me personally.
If I didn't say it before, I meant to tell you are not the first person to say that to me.
Okay.
I actually get it on a pretty regular basis because I think the way that I do readings is very, listen, I'm not here to tell you your future. I'm not here to be your best friend. I'm here to tell you what I meant to tell you. And I'm certainly not mean about it, but
no.
I I have a job. Like my job is to sit you down and say, listen, these are the things that you're supposed to hear. And I do it very nicely, and I do it like your best friend telling you the tea, but like sometimes people are like, wow, all right, I'm tired. Okay, thanks. Let me think on it and we'll come back. But at the end of the day, it's good stuff. It really is it's all done out of love.
Yeah, it's all done out of love. That's the most important part. And to get one of these ass kickings done out of love, where can people find you?
So the easiest way to find me is on my website, which is thedivinerlife.com. Do you need me to spell that? I don't know. Okay, I wasn't sure if there would be show notes or anything.
Underneath the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah, the show notes, whatever.
Perfect. So thedivinerlife.com, and if you want to follow me on social media, Instagram is basically where I live. So I am at The Diviner Life on Instagram.
Yeah, and do you still do like coffee and cards and stuff like that in the morning?
I see him popping up doing lives pretty much every day.
Yeah, I do a scheduled live every Monday and Friday. So I do a basic reading for humanity kind of thing every Monday. Yeah. And then on Friday, I answer 3 questions at random it's kind of like a Q&A. You ask a question, I pull some cards.
That's so fun. Yeah. Yep. Love that. And and the tea apothecary is up and running and doing everything. I feel like my mother bought so much tea from you and gave it to me. Like I'm stocked forever.
Yeah. Selling tea to your mom is always fun because we always like meet up in a parking lot like we're doing a drug deal. It's like and I'm like, here's your bag of loose herbs. Please don't get pulled over. So on Instagram, again, it's at the.t.apothecary, or you can go to my website, theteanapothecary.com.
Excellent. Sweet. Okay. We'll make sure it's in the show notes. That's what it's called.
That we will. Well, I'm looking forward to our next reading, Michael, and I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing your truth and your journey. And
big thanks to the listeners for making it this far. And
if you did make it this far, we appreciate you because we do know time is valuable and attention span is just as valuable these days. And so we appreciate you. Again, as always, if you guys need anything, if you want to learn more, if there's anything we can do, just reach out, let us know, ask your questions, comment, whatever platform you're on listening to this, comment below, and we'll do our best to answer it. And if you have any questions specifically for Michael, let him know, reach out to him personally.
He doesn't mind either.
Yeah, I could use some friends, so pile it on.
Okay, thank you guys. We love you. This has been the Gray Matters podcast with Jackie Lauricella.
And my name is Josh Perry, and we appreciate all of you. And until next time.